The scream echoes through the stone courtyard. A man falls. There is no battle there. There are no invaders. Only the heavy silence of the heat and the terrified gaze of those watching. Priests murmur prayers. A scribe drops his brush. No one understands. No one is in control. The body is carried away in haste, but the fear remains. It spreads faster than any disease. Something is wrong. Something invisible crosses the heart of one of the most powerful civilizations on Earth. How can such a great empire begin to collapse without even knowing what it is fighting against? We are at the height of Egypt's new kingdom, a period of glory, expansion, and incomparable wealth. Pharaohs rule as living gods. Colossal monuments rise in honor of eternity. Armies march beyond the borders, securing tribute and power. But behind this image of divine order, something begins to seep in. It is not an invasion. It is not a declared war. It is a silent rupture, a set of crises that together shake the foundations of a civilization that seemed eternal. What happens here is not just a crisis, it is the beginning of a collapse that will forever change the ancient world. Contrary to what many imagine, Egypt was not in decline, quite the opposite. It was the peak of a world that seemed perfect. The cities were vibrant, full of color, sound, and movement. Thebes pulsed with religious processions, chants, and constant offerings. Massive temples dominated the horizon, covered in gold and stories carved in stone. Trade flowed along the Nile like blood through a vital artery. Boats loaded with grain, precious stones, and timber crossed its waters daily. Markets buzzed with aromas, voices, and negotiations. Gold from Nubia, timber from the Levant, incense from distant lands. Everything converged on Egypt. Stability seemed absolute. The Nile rose at the right time. Harvests came in abundance. Order was maintained. The pharaoh was not just a ruler, he was the link between men and the gods. And as the people worked, celebrated, and believed, there was a silent, almost dangerous feeling that this world was permanent, untouchable. But it is precisely this complexity, this interdependence, that turns strength into vulnerability. Egyptian society was a precise machine. Farmers depended on the Nile's floods. Artisans produced for temples and elites. Scribes recorded every detail of administrative life. Priests interpreted the divine will. Everything connected, everything balanced. Trade routes linked Egypt to distant kingdoms. Ideas, goods, and people circulated constantly. But when something fails in this system, everything fails together. And the problem begins far from there, very far, in dry lands, beyond the known borders. Subtle climate changes alter rainfall patterns. Regions once fertile become arid. Entire peoples are forced to migrate. Crops fail. Animals die. Hunger begins to spread. There are no clear records. There is no scientific understanding. Only signs. The drier wind, the harder soil, the emptier sky. These human displacements become the point of contact. Foreign peoples begin to move in mass. Some seek trade, others survival, others still conquest. They arrive at Egypt's borders, at its ports, at its commercial cities, and with them they bring instability. Tensions rise, resources become scarce. What was once exchange now becomes dispute. The spread is rapid. Trade routes, once symbols of prosperity, become channels of crisis. Regions begin to fail. Cities face shortages.
The Nile, in some years, does not reach the expected levels. Agriculture suffers, storehouses empty, grain prices rise, hunger ceases to be a distant risk and becomes reality. The empire, once secure, begins to waver. Human responses are limited by the understanding of the time. Priests intensify rituals, offerings are multiplied, the gods must be appeased. Some believe the pharaoh has lost divine favor, others blame external forces. There is no consensus, there is no effective solution, and in some cases, decisions worsen the situation. Resources are diverted to temples, military expeditions continue, draining even more of what remains. Over time, the social structure begins to crack. Workers abandon their roles. There are records of strikes, something unthinkable in such a rigidly organized system. Tombs are looted. Law loses its strength. Trust disappears. Fear takes hold. Neighbors distrust one another. Families struggle to survive. And as in every deep crisis, the need to blame someone emerges. Foreigners are viewed with suspicion. Marginalized groups become targets. Tension rises. Violence is no longer just a possibility. It is a response. Desperation transforms society. The divine order that sustained everything seems to have been abandoned. But the collapse is not limited to the cities. In the countryside, the situation is even more brutal. Entire villages are left behind. Fields are not harvested. The land returns to its raw state. The Nile continues to flow, indifferent, but no longer sustains as it once did. Nature begins to reclaim the space that had been shaped for generations. Eventually, the crisis loses strength, not because it was resolved, but because it exhausts itself. Fewer people, less demand, less movement. The system collapses to a point where there is nothing left to sustain the crisis. Silence returns, but it is not the same silence as before. It is an empty silence. The world that emerges after this is different. Central power weakens. Egypt will never again have the same absolute dominance. Economic changes arise. Trust in divine order is shaken. The mindset shifts. What was once eternal now reveals itself as fragile. And perhaps this is the greatest lesson. Civilizations do not fall only through invasions or wars. They can collapse from within, slowly, invisibly. The complexity that strengthens them can, at a certain moment, become their greatest weakness. Today, we also live in an interconnected world, dependent, complex, and, like Egypt in the New Kingdom, we often believe this structure is too solid to fail. But is it really? History is not just a record of the past. It is a mirror, and when we look into it, the question remains, are we truly more prepared or just more confident? Because understanding what happened before may be the only way to recognize what is beginning to happen now.